was trying to talk to my daughter, Winnie, about this and say, you know, how would you feel if you had to get up, leave, take only a few things with you? And what would those things be? And how would, you know, what would you do? And it's just too big of a concept. I mean, she was like, I would take my stuffed animals. I'm like, okay,
good call.
I guess that's good.
I'm on board there.
And then we were having this discussion and my mom said, well, what would you guys do? Because Ben would take Ollie and he'd have to carry Ollie, and Ollie's 40 pounds, our dog, who has another 40 pounds of medical gear. And he was like, so Ben wouldn't be able to help you carry anything. So I would be the one having to carry, you know, I honestly, it's just such a sad, scary situation. And what do you do if you have to leave your home? And like, how do you take things with you? What do you decide to take?
I'd like to know also the assimilation process. Cause I mean, okay, you're going somewhere, you don't know where, you don't know. And I think especially in that era, like right now, a lot of things are connected. Like, I think there is like, you know, there's a Citibank or a Chase somewhere anywhere in the world. Like you can access your money. And when I watch like older films or older documentaries about like that kind of feeling of, you know, I got to the city with nothing but like $5 in a suitcase, and you're like, and you survived. Like right now, if someone just said, you're going out and you have nothing except what you're carrying, and I don't know what you had in the bank. I don't know if that bank still exists. If that money is still on record, if you could still access it. Like there's so many little tiny words. Maybe it's me as like a weird planner who likes to know where everything is at all times. But there's all these little things I think of having to pick up when you've lived a certain life and a level of either stability or comfort. And then to just, because I think
we've talked about this a lot too, Gene, in the event of a natural disaster, or having to evacuate because of a hurricane, or
flood.
A flood. And so what are the things that you think are the most important things that people take with them in the event of an emergency?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that usually at this point, people talk about go bags, but that's emergency supplies. Bless you.
Thank you.
I'd say people talk about go bags a lot, and I think they're awesome. They're great. Like, have a bag to go. But the reality is you're not going to put all the possessions you actually use in a go bag in the closet or in the trunk of your car. You're not going to say, hey, let me keep my passport and IDs in this thing. So, because you need them in daily life, and you're not just waiting there for an emergency to strike. So a lot of times we say, if you have everything in an orderly fashion, for example, the IDs you need, certain things like a birth certificate, like have them in one place and know where they are. So if you have to grab,
we have an important box, and in the important things box has things like passports and IDs and really just
and like portable heirlooms of that sort. You could have, and also social security cards you could have in there. You could have your marriage certificate if you want. But again, you can get a replacement of some of these things, and it's just a hassle. And if you're moving from place to place, you might not want to have to deal with that. It's going to be difficult because again, having that set address is where a lot of this ID is being sent and how you verify. So you're going to want it, and assuming that you're going to return home at some point, or you're going to go someplace that's familiar, if there's family somewhere else, if you're stuck in a shelter or temporary housing, again, the stress of that is pretty tough. If you have young kids, if you have pets, that becomes another stress. So you have to start looking at what would I need for each one, and also what's a comfort item. You know, Winnie's saying that you take a stuffed animal, knowing what are those things. If you have any cash in your house, keep that close. If you're the type that hides it all over your house, stop. Like, it should be in one place, because if you do file for property insurance, you can't just say, oh, and I had $8,000 in envelopes scattered around my place. They're going to say, sure. Like, do you have proof?
Medications. If you have any important medications, if you or your kids or if your pets have medications that they rely on, make sure you take that.
The medication is important. We talk about and again, having your phone, computer, charging some kind of capability, whether it's a brick with that. If you're leaving ideally in your car, you're not just rushing out and your car didn't get swept away, which again, a lot of people, that becomes a huge issue, where you don't have the transportation. You could use that, have things in your car that are basically extras of those items that you'd keep at home. So if you did have you could always charge a brick through your car, a power brick, while you're charging your phones and computers. But you also don't want to, and we talk about, like, when it comes to food or perishables, it's always good to have like canned things available that you're going to want to use if you do get power knocked out. You want to know that if your toiletries are important when it comes to toothbrush, deodorant, because you're probably going to be huddled together with your family and you will start to smell.
Maybe shampoo.
you could have shampoo. He's like curling iron, straightening. Like, I gotta look good.
Yeah.
And really, like, when it comes to clothes, it's like having a change or a set just like that, but also recognizing that as you start doing this, like, you prioritize. You say, okay, what's the stuff that's really difficult to replace that I'm going to need? And that's why, for example, cash comes in handy. If all the power's out somewhere, you're going to need, and you need to buy supplies of some sort. There are credit card machines. I remember when the power was off in New York for a couple of days, and a lot of these places were like, it's cash only. We can't run credit card transactions. I mean, maybe now with Wi-Fi and Square, and you could have it plugged into your phone, but it's still a concern that you might want to need to gas up the car and need to pay cash as you're getting out of town. Those are certain things. And also heed the warnings that are happening in advance. You shouldn't live your life in this fear that you're going to have to evacuate at any moment. But knowing that, right. I know some people that are survivalists and they're kind of out of their minds in how much they prepare. But I realize those bags wouldn't be very useful with their young kids. They're not going to want to eat.
But also, I think having things online is also really important, and organizing them online. Obviously, we are big proponents of that, but making sure that you have access to certain accounts and documents. If you can't bring them with you physically, to at least have digital versions of them online. Obviously, companies like Everplans have ways for you to do that, but there's other ways for you to do that too. And then I think if I think about my own home, and we were just talking about this, like having the important files box, it is really important to not have stuff super disorganized around your house, because in the event that you do need to, like, I always know where I wear I wear contact lenses, but I'm nervous that if something were to ever happen and I was having a scratch in my eye, or I had to take the contacts out, I really can't see without my contacts. So I always have a pair of glasses somewhere where I know where they are. So I keep a pair on my night table, and I keep another pair in my purse, so that no matter where, in case I'm having an eye emergency, because I've had those before, I can see. Because to me, I literally can't really see without wearing some sort of contacts or glasses. So in addition, knowing where those important documents are, that you can get access to your passport or your any other important IDs that you feel like that you don't have in your wallet at all times. Also, your wallet, making sure you know where your wallet is. I always know where my wallet is. It's always in the same place. I never have it not in my bag, in this one particular bag. And so, but I know, Ben, for example, is always looking for his wallet. Like, where did I leave it? Or where are my keys? Right. It's like, I always know where my keys are. I put them in the same place every time. Now, I don't know that you have to do that, because I'm not thinking about an emergency all the time. I just like to know where things are.
That's a good habit.
I think having things, what was that?
It's a good habit. I mean, those habits, I'm the same way with you, Abby. Like, if my keys aren't in one of like two places, they're lost. Like, and occasionally, you're coming through the door and you might put it in like the wrong pocket, or you're wearing a jacket, and then immediately I'll look and I'll be like, wait, the keys aren't there and they're not here. Oh, then there's that moment of, like, a lot of people have that panic when they reach for their phone and they realize they put it in a different pocket, and you can't be scrambling around. But I think a lot of people they do throw their wallet down anywhere. They throw their keys down anywhere. They throw paper bills down anywhere. And for me, that does frustrate me, because I'm thinking, like, you shouldn't have to look at 6 places. If you're the type of person that it takes you an extra minute or two to leave the house because you're finding everything, it's just stress that you could avoid.
It's exactly. And so I think that it's about knowing what things to organize, but then making sure that they actually are organized inside your home too.
Yep.
Because it's you never know when you're going to need to First of all, it could just be your daily life. Like you said,
Yes.
just getting out the door becomes easier if you know where things are. But then obviously in the event that you have to rush out, you know where things are.
Yeah. And you're not also taking items that really aren't necessary, because at a certain time you have to think, okay, what's replaceable? You know, you're not going to want to start grabbing, oh, my toaster, my microwave, and this office chair. Like,
Right.
it's also a lot of times in that panic, people might take things that aren't really that thoughtful.
Well, even medications.
Yeah.
So I take certain medications. Other people in the house take certain medications. I keep all the medications in one place.
Yeah.
And in the morning, everybody takes their medications at the same time.
Yeah.
The ones that we take in the morning, that is. And so it creates habits of organization so that you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. It just becomes part of your routine.
Yeah. And when the catastrophic stuff happens, and again, a lot of times when people have to leave, like that's why I think right now the tragedy of seeing people having to just being so displaced. You think, yeah, if it's that big of a catastrophic like change to your life, it is kind of terrifying, and it does make you think, okay, how could I protect my family in some way that we would at least have some starting point and know where to go. And that's why I think, like, for me, that one of the biggest stresses now that so much is digital, it's taken the stress off me, because I always said, if something happened to my computer, if it felt, I'm like, I really wouldn't be losing I'm not losing all my photos because I don't keep them on my computer. I'm not losing all my documents because I don't keep them on my computer like that. If, there's accounts in other places I could sign in and find that. So right there, it's not about, oh, I have to grab all my receipts and bills or even old tax documents, because it's like they're securely stored and shared, triply password protected in areas. That's important, knowing that I don't have that stress. Whereas many, many years ago, if your computer melted down, it meant you were screwed. The one thing I will say now is people need to be careful with who they share it with in their family, because I recently learned, and I won't call out any family member, someone had deleted their entire photo drive, not realizing it. And they know who they are. It's not me. I'm fine with it. But the thing was, I can't even blame the person, because a lot of times you think, well, I'm just moving this on this computer.
It sounds like you're upset about this. Were there photos that you wanted on that drive?
No, I don't care. It's their family, not mine. But
So
it's like, but I'm saying that those types of things that happen, it seems like there's this sense of security and safety where it's all online, it'll be safe. But there's also really sneaky ways that you don't realize how you could delete them without even realizing it, and think, oh, I'm taking it off this computer, not realizing that this person had access to the main file and wasn't deleting it from their computer. They were deleting the main file and they didn't know. So they feel terrible. The family, it wasn't like they lost every photo that was ever taken.
Well, actually, you're making me think that in the event, if you do have family photos,
yes,
like actual photos,
pictures,
you should make sure that they are digitized.
Yes.
But also that you store them somewhere safely.
Yeah.
But if you have the actual photos, if there are any photos or heirlooms or things that are important to you, to also know where those are,
yes,
because if you have to leave somewhere quickly, that the things that are important to you are easy to grab.
Wasn't that on that show you used to watch, the one that made you cry all the time? This is us, where something about like a character he went, something that led to his death was about recovering like heirloom of some sort.
Yeah, now I can't remember what it was. I think it was a videotape, maybe a VHS.
Okay.
That they had been looking for, and in the show, I don't want to give it away.
It doesn't matter. It's just it's like, spoiler alert if you don't watch This Is Us. It's
spoiler alert.
It's told in different eras, and one guy is,
well, he dies in a fire.
Yeah, he's dead from when the show starts, right? Isn't it something this guy's dead?
I don't know if you know from the very start, but maybe everybody knows.
I never watched a show and I knew he was dead. Clearly it wasn't spoiled for me. So, but he
we'll
lived his life.
We'll have to go back. Let's look. I'm gonna now. I'll rewatch the episode and we can talk about it at another.
But it shows that something's irreplaceable like that. And I know, because now again, if you do have your wedding video or something, like, upload it to YouTube, like literally. But
also your wedding ring. Yeah. So right, like if there are certain things, like I know where my important things are.
Yeah.
But it's also just good to sometimes think about, okay, in the event that I would have to leave, what are the top 5 things or 10
Yeah.
things that I would need to collect, and where do I know where they
And
are?
the most important thing is also to get out with your life. Because, I mean, I know that guy, it's cute on a TV show to go back in and die because you want to get a videotape, but don't do that. Like, I mean, everything,
Right.
like things
And
can be
there's no
replaced.
comparison
Yes.
to, what we're talking about on TV shows, or what we're
Yes.
talking about with having to leave because of a tornado or because of a
Flood
flood, or there's
or
no
power outage.
comparison. Or
Yes.
power outage. I mean, that these are very different scenarios. Nobody should ever have to think about what would happen if I had to leave my home because my country was at war.
Yeah.
And so that's just a whole other. I think that the piece about that, learning about my grandparents and my grandmother and what they struggled with is it's just really hits home for me, the point that these stories are so important
Yeah.
to preserve and to cherish, and that we're also going through a crazy time right now. We, over the past 2 years, going through the COVID-19 pandemic, right, has been, this is also an extraordinary event that we're going through,
Yeah.
that our grandchildren and great grandchildren should know about. And we've talked about this before, but it just makes it, to me, feel so much more
It's more relatable
important.
because here's another, I mean, when you think about it, and I think the pandemic proved this. When it started, it seemed like, oh, it can't happen here. We're fine. I remember when SARS hit, it didn't affect us at all in America. And I think people have an impossible way of envisioning that maybe one day you could be chased from your home due to war. And to think that it's something that every time you think something's over and, oh, that's ancient history, that won't happen. What if it did happen? What if those, like reading about your grandma, it's not that far removed. It's someone that you knew. And
Yeah.
and people think this world has become, it's very, the global world, the global sentiments seem like it's no longer like a person here or there. And I think when you see these stories from grandparents, we need to kind of remember that history, because one of my favorite quotes was from Truman, and it's, the only new things in life is the history you don't know. And when I think of that, I think, okay, we're watching things that happened to your grandparents, to my grandparents, to other people's families, to people, and it doesn't even have to be in other countries. It's happened all over the world. And that distance, I think, has made people a little feel like we're past it, and
Yeah.
it's someone else's problem. And we worry about evacuations or things like that. But this, the pandemic showed that, it can affect everyone and no one's above that. And it doesn't make anyone better or worse than someone else. But dealing with these situations, it could be a reality at some point. And I think people have to have some empathy towards that. You want to try to help, you want to try to put yourself in that position. And I think this helps, knowing those stories, because again, as these stories disappear, that's where, as history disappears and people don't pay attention to it, that's how we repeat the same mistakes.
Well, for me, it's just made me, I feel compelled to try to do something to help. And this has become something I'm, reading about every day, every night, and just really trying to figure out what can I do to make any tiny amount of difference. I don't have the answer, but it's something that I feel like really matters.
And what you're doing is really good too, because I know right now there are, the problems are overwhelming, because you mentioned you were helping with, there was feeding for Afghanistan at refugees. And we know that some people, they get apathetic and they say something like, oh, well, what about this problem? What about this problem? What about this? And I'm like, stop. You can't solve every problem, but you can pick ones and really focus on those. The same way you need to protect and worry about your family, you could pick an issue and a topic, and it doesn't mean you're displeased and you don't like another topic. Just because you're helping certain refugees or you're worried about certain causes, everyone has to pick those. And the way for you to make a difference is to be focused on those. So if it's rescuing pets, if it's helping elderly people, if it's working with some diseases, if it's working with food drives, like, pick those and be focused on those causes, and don't try to spread yourself thin and think you could solve every problem in the world. And I think as you find those personal causes, it does bleed into other people. And I look at my brother-in-law with his ALS stuff, it bled into our whole family. Like, all of us have done so much and cared about it because of him and his passion. But then we also have our own ones. And then when we do it, it bleeds into their passion. So that's how you do it. So don't try to make it all about everything. And if people do start saying, well, what about this or what about that? Say, right now, this is my issue. I'm focusing on it. I want to do something good. And maybe I'll get to that later, but this is what's important to me. And everyone should have something that's important to them and focus on that.
Yes.